listeners, I just want to welcome again Tsh Oxenreider to our visit together today. Tish is a writer of very good books, and she teaches great books to local high schoolers who she says are thoroughly unimpressed with anything she does. But I think enough of us moms know enough to be impressed. She's a podcaster and a pilgrimage guide, as you may have seen even on the graphic that we did for this. I mean, the gorgeous background that it's like, is that photoshopped? I mean, it was just incredible. But no, real life things that Tish goes and experiences and leads. And she leads groups of new friends every year to a wide variety of places around the world to hear from God in a surprising way. Both a little Baggins and a little Took, she and her family of five once spent a school year out of backpacks visiting 30 countries while working and world schooling. And yes, her name is spelled correctly. It's Tish, sounding like it has an I, but with no I. And now, having said that, I'm going to say this was my introduction to Tish. True confessions, I didn't know about Tish. I hadn't read anything about Tish, but at School Academy, we got an email in the inbox asking a question about one of our courses. And the signature TSH, and then there was a little link below, just kind of like a signature line with, a website info. And so I just needed to do some snooping to know how to pronounce your name in my mind. When you're writing to somebody and like, how do I pronounce? Um, and boy, did I open up a world of things to be impressed by. So, um, Tish, before I blab a little bit more about, kind of your books and everything, what did you want to say to some of these fine folks here in this Advent season? You just greet us.
Hello. It's good to be with you guys on a Friday afternoon. When I say my students are thoroughly unimpressed, I really mean that because I think, this is my ninth year of teaching. I think I've learned over the years, the benefits of separating my online work with my real life. And so most of my day is really spent, here in my local community. And yeah, I write books and do all those things that you named, but really and truly, like the bulk of my work, I feel like, or at least maybe my focus is here at home where I work and I lead, our homeschool co-op and I just do my thing like what most moms do, really and truly. So I'm in the thick of Advent and, trying to get everything kind of untangled as I want to celebrate the upcoming holidays, but not too fast, and wrapping up the school semester and ready to be done, but still have a few more weeks to go. I mean, it's just like everybody else, really and truly. Yeah.
Right? Can we get an amen? Everybody, all of us homeschooling mamas. So Tish, I'm a mom of four. Tell us, and mine are boy, girl, and most all of them are out of the nest now. I have one more who's a senior this year, but otherwise, that. So tell us your little setup in mom land. How many kids do you have, and so
Yeah.
forth?
My oldest is a junior in college. She's almost 21. And so she's currently 1,000 miles away, but will be home in 13 days, I believe. No one's counting though. And then my middle guy is a senior and he's almost 18, just a few weeks shy of that. And then my youngest is 15 and he's a sophomore. So I've got my two boys at home. And so I'm in the thick of the sophomore, senior years of high school around here.
So, I want to dig in a little bit. And again, wherever you're joining us from, you are welcome to just listen in or have your cameras on, off. We're so glad, Tisha Frost, it's great to see you. Welcome. And we're going to have a little Q&A toward the end. But for starters, I wanted to be sure that where some of you have probably been longtime followers of Tish and read podcasts, have books, so on and so forth, and some of you may be just getting to know her. So Nancy is going to put into the chat for some resources that you can look at and get to know Tish better. You can go onto her website and look at all her books. Again, I've been thoroughly enjoying this and Tish, every night, I kid you not, I'm in the bed with my hubby and we're reading the day's submission. And what is so amazing, and this is great for all you educators, um, I really was like, this is Advent lesson plans because it is a write-up of it, and then there's a prompt to ask yourself a question, and then there is this thing that says, listen to this. And what's amazing is she's already curated a whole Spotify playlist with each item to listen to. And then this has really wowed me. There's this reflection piece that is curated art and a prompt to read, look, gaze upon, and reflect. So, yeah, as Nancy puts this in the chat, Tish, tell me, kind of what inspired this. Are you still using it with your kids, or are your own kids like thoroughly unimpressed? Whatever, Mom. You're making us light another candle for another year. Tell us
Right.
about this.
Well, they remain thoroughly unimpressed because they're my children, of course, but we still use it every year. So that both things are true. I will say it never doesn't feel weird to read my own book. It kind of feels a little Gilderoy Lockhart, like, oh, let me get my own book and read from Advent. So I make everyone else read them because I don't like, the sound of my own voice reading my own words. It just feels very weird. But we still do it. So we even at my boy's age, we even buy the candle set where we make the our own beeswax candles, even though we've been doing that for 10 years and it takes them 30 seconds now. They're like, here you go, Mom. For me, it's just what we do. And so yeah, just about every night we go through it together and we pick and choose. One of the reasons I created the book the way I did was because I was looking for a book like it and couldn't find it. So I wanted something that was very open and go. One of the issues I had with a lot of the Advent books out there is that they were amazing and thoughtful, but they built on each day. And during December, there's usually just a lot going on. One night there might be some kind of, dance recital, and then there's a company party, and then there's some sort of outing. And then before you know it, you're like 3 or 4 days behind, and you have to like backlog all these readings, and you're just tired. And so you just feel defeated, before you start. So this is a book that you can just like flip to the next day wherever you are, and then just keep going. And so I wanted that. And then I wanted something that we could just pick and choose from. So like you said, there's 5 different parts of each day. But if we're not doing this till 10:30 at night because we just had a couple over for dinner last night, which is literally our case last night. We're just going to do the scripture reading and listening to the music, lighting the candle, and we're going to call it good. But maybe tonight we'll actually put the art up on the TV and we'll have time to reflect on the question and slow down a bit more and do it all. So um, where was I going with that? Other than just to say it's super, super flexible. And so even though, yes, we still use it, um, we use it differently every day of the week, which is how it's intended.
Yeah, the entire design was so so thoughtful because I was like, this is for real people. And I've loved it. Okay, so this leads me to one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is um would you say, your most popular book? Like from feedback you've gotten, I don't know, maybe even sales numbers, whatever, but feedback that you get, what seems to be your most popular book?
Well, since we've already talked about Shadow and Light, it's honestly a near exact tie between Shadow and Light in this other book. So I'll just bring up this other book only since we just talked about Shadow and Light. It is the book called At Home in the World. So At Home in the World is that memoir I wrote of the school year we spent traveling.
Mhm.
And I'm continually surprised by hearing people still finding it, which is super fun because this marks year 11 since we've done that trip. So we returned in 2015, and so we're about to hit, 11 years since we left, which is amazing to me that it's been that long already. But I love that it still resonates with so many people. I hear stories of people using it as sort of an armchair traveling experience. We aren't going to be able to go places, which I get. Most people can't. So I'm going to just live vicariously through your story, all the way to people using it almost as like a guidebook. Like, okay, we're going to do this thing. And I'll get some emails sometimes from people asking, okay, got any tips or where can I find links for, how you did X, Y, and Z. So that's really fun to me that both Shadow and Light, this daily devotional for all sorts of families and individuals, and then this, wild experience we had for a school year.
Yeah. I, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who are desiring to live vicariously or actually in those terms.
Hmm.
We at Scholar Academy, we have people who join our courses from kind of all over the world. Like we're taking an RV trip for, across the US for a solid year or otherwise. Now, I'm curious from your vantage point, those are the ones that are popular for others. Do you have a particular book that is like especially near and dear to your heart?
Mm. Well, aside from that one, because the reason that one's near and dear is because of that experience we had. So it's in some ways hard to separate the book from that experience, because that one really is near and dear. The other one probably is Bitter and Sweet, which is the compendium book to Shadow and Light, the Advent book. So that one's for Lent. And I think the reason that one's near and dear to me is because Lent has always held a special place in my heart, but it's not because it's easy and not because I love how long it is and not because, I'm great at practicing Lent during that Lenten season. But it was the book I needed for Lent. I needed to have written that. I needed to have gone through it's, Lent is 6 weeks long. And so I used six plus a few days, actually. And so I used that broad idea to frame it with the seven virtues and vices. And so I needed to have had that experience of walking through weekly each of the seven vices and then how, God pairs them with virtues that we are meant to put on and walk through. So very much a journey to write and then to read every year because just Lent is hard, but Lent is good. It's actually one of my favorite, it's second to Advent as my favorite season in the liturgical calendar, so it's good for us. So that one is probably up there as my personal, most meaningful one.
Mm. I was talking to some my niece who's near and dear to my heart and who's been living with us for the past year as well, briefly, and we were talking about taste and actually some other family members as well, and how what the human taste mechanism, like we've got five or six tastes, various tastes, and the idea that actually you need all of them in your palate to have a complete and fulfilling culinary or just taste experience. And that means the bitter has to be in there, the sour, and to have only sweet is not so sweet.
Yeah.
um, and that just seems reminiscent of what you're experiencing. I know what you mean about the richness of Lent. It's hard and it's a good hard. So I can't wait. That's going to be my Lenten reading, I'm sure. Uh,
Good. Well, and that's the case I make in that, if you can't tell from the title, that every fast in the liturgical calendar is followed by a feast.
Mm,
And so God doesn't just leave us, with that, like, well, hope you, hunker down and practice the hard stuff well. Anyway, time to move on. No, we recognize that we do this in order for the glory that's to come. And so feasting and fasting go hand in hand together, and they make each one more, eternally beautiful and temporarily beautiful. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So tell us, first of all, these are
Hmm.
books that you've written, but also you have a pretty regular regimen of putting stuff out there in the wide world that people get to enjoy, whether it's newsletter, podcast. So tell us a little bit about some of those other things, and then the bitter and sweet in those things too, because I know you also have been working hard to churn out another book. So tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, the bulk of my work really is book writing, and that just is behind the scenes. So I prioritize that in any given week. So I did just turn in a book manuscript in early October, and I'm about to get my next round of edits. So I'm kind of enjoying the calm before the storm again. And I'm working on a novel, so I'm, keeping that habit up. So I say that to bring up that I just have a hierarchy of work that I prioritize, and so book writing, and then obviously educating my children and running the co-op I run and teaching the class. But then I write a weekly newsletter and sometimes several times a week newsletter, depending on how much free time I have. I used to write online as my main bread and butter. This is back in the days when blogging was becoming, its own thing for the first time. And so I, about 6 years ago, switched to just a newsletter format because it reminded me of old school blogging. I had grown quite weary of social media and all of those algorithms and demands that it requires of people to stay, at the top of someone's feed. It just was not very humane, I felt like. And so I switched to a newsletter format. And so for me, it's a life-giving way to stay in touch with people, because I'm still floored and honored that people would read anything, after all these years that I would have to say. So it's my way of staying in touch with them and reminding them, like, I am a normal person here living my life just like you. And so every week on Friday, I send out a short newsletter of just short thoughts I have, things I've read that week or listened to or whatever, that kind of thing. And then I have a podcast called A Drink with a Friend. And this comes after many iterations of podcasting. So I've been podcasting since 2010, which was kind of the smoke signal days of podcasting, because back then it was way harder to do it, in terms of the technology. And now, everyone's neighbor has a podcast, so it's not as unique at all. But I do it because I love it at this point. For a while, it was also my main bread and butter, and I got quite tired of the never-ending hamster wheel of constantly having to put out new episodes. So now I just do it for the love of it. And A Drink with a Friend is really and truly simply conversations with people, and they are grouped into themes, usually like different seasons based on whatever it is I want to talk about with whoever it is I want to talk about. We always just have a drink on hand, and this season we are talking about books. So it's two books per episode, a book we loved from childhood and a book we love from adulthood. And, how did they influence us? What do they mean? How have they affected us? And to me, they're great because they're the conversations I'd want to have in a coffee shop anyway. Like literally, this is the thing I'd want to talk about with someone across the table. So for me, I'm just, honored that I even get to do that with whoever I want at any given time. So it's a lot of fun.
It is. It is a lot of fun because I've listened to a few recently, and I was like, "Oh, I know that book. I know that book from childhood," or "Oh, I need to revisit that." I felt compelled to reread some John Steinbeck after one of your listening one of
Yeah.
your recent conversations. And listen, let me tell y'all, the five quick things from Tish are something I don't delete from my inbox. And we all have
Aw.
really full inboxes, but those five quick things, there's such a richness and a humaneness and a relatability there, and really valuable takeaways like, oh, I didn't know about that. Whether it's, a product or a piece of music or five quick things that you really benefit from. So I have loved that. And
I'm
again, I
glad.
want to go back to the fact that I really knew nothing about Tish's work and her until I just stumbled upon it as, fellow homeschooling moms who are finding ways to resource our own children and so forth. And when I was snooping on your website, Tish, to figure out how to pronounce your name, um, it was so beautifully laid out and richly resourced. And then I was like, oh, look, and she publishes even what the books that she reads and recommends. And I think I mentioned to you that one caught my eye. So I wanna ask you, like, in the world of book recommendations, and there's so much out there to read, particularly in the context of being homeschool moms and being just moms who are raising children that are unimpressed with us. You did mention this one book that was You Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. I'd never heard
Oh,
of the
yeah.
book, but I did look it up, look at it, ended
Mhm.
up ordering it to, snoop. So whether you want to talk about that book in particular, which I found intriguing, or just anything as a resource, homeschooling mom, tell us about the books that have enriched your life as a mom, and particularly a mom slash educator.
Yeah, I mean, I can unpack a few thoughts. It's been quite a while since I've read Reading the Mouth That Bites You, but the reason I know I initially read that one was because a fellow homeschool co-op teacher recommended it to me, because we were just bemoaning slash just laughing at the daily challenge of raising adolescents. It was for my oldest, who I believe was maybe 14, 15 at the time. I don't remember. And just talking about how it was all so new. I have learned since, in the years I've taught this grade or, the high school age that sophomores around there tend to be a pretty challenging age. I find the wise fool name really, really rings true. And so, I was in the thick of that era. And one of the things I appreciate about this psychologist's approach is basically this idea of raising our children to be able to be fully functioning adults takes intentional steps a little at a time, and that it would behoove us really to start as early as we can with small little ways that we can give them freedom in ways that have low stakes. So that by the time, they become freshmen in college and they are leaving the home for the first time, this isn't the first time they're doing their laundry or having to, decide what to do with their free time and turn in something on time or go party or whatever, that this isn't the first time they've experienced that. So his idea broadly is just this idea of giving them emancipation is what he calls it, just kind of tongue in cheek because he references the era of the British Empire letting go of India from their empire. And the way they did it was slowly in different provinces. And so he's like, give them this province, give them that province, a little at a time. And so the first one he says is their room, like no longer require a certain standard of their room with certain conditions, such as like it can't smell, or we have to be able to shut the door, or you can't have music blaring through, or whatever it is, like ways that it affects the rest of the house. That's just an example. But he says when you start with that, you're giving them some sort of ownership to the place where they reign in a way. And so, one of the books that influenced me when the kids were younger was Love and Logic, that approach to, giving your children opportunities to make choices with the things that don't matter. Like, do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt today? That kind of thing. So that when you need to step in as an authority figure on the things that matter, we need to leave the playground now so that we go to this other thing on time. You can. It's that same idea. So you were giving them freedom in the things that are low stakes so that later they have earned the right for the higher stakes. Anyway, that's that in a nutshell was a book that was pretty helpful for me. That when our oldest got her driver's license, we even did some of what they suggested, like create a contract of like, you agree to this, we agree to this, and, to let you have the freedom with the family car, etc. So that was a book, one of the more practical, I guess, parenting books that influenced me. But I mean, honestly, the longer I do this, my youngest is still 15, so I've got, plenty to learn. Um, I think the best books for me that influence my parenting and my educating have to do with like books that help me become more human, like the books that I need to read to make me who I am. So, the Chesterton books and the C.S. Lewis books and the Wendell Berry books, those which I know aren't as fun to hear sometimes because you're like, tell me that one book I've never heard of that gave you all the answers. And that's just hasn't been the case for me. In fact, part of my little side bonus of getting to teach the class I've taught is that it forces me to do the homework too. It forces me to reread these classics that I would be tempted to just assign to my kids and just say, like, all right, go with God. You have a great time reading the Iliad. And secretly thinking, like, I already did that. I don't need to do it again. But no, forcing me to read them again as an adult and let them have their way with me and do the work of reading those sometimes challenging, but definitely life-giving works because they've stood the test of time. So honestly, it's those books that have influenced me the most. There's a few practical ones when it comes to teaching, pedagogy or classroom, not really management, but classroom methods. But otherwise, it's more of those broader, holistic classics that have influenced me.
So this is a freebie. It's just come up based on what you've said. Here's my question. Is there any particular angle that you think parents need as an antidote today? I mean, I ask this because feeding the mouth that bites you is an example, and planned emancipation and things like that, that perhaps that is sort of an antidote to an unhealthy kind of overparenting, helicopter mothering,
Mm.
whatever we want to say. And then you said, but really the things that have been most instructive to you is the things that you read that are just formative, that the things that we would call the classics and things like that. So, given what you're seeing and sensing in the world as we know it, the world of parenting and so forth, any particular antidotes that you're feeling like we might need?
Um, I think one of the things I've heard from my students, my kids, and my kids' friends when they come over is one of the things they appreciate when they talk with me is that I treat them like an adult. I don't talk down to them or I talk to them as though they have valid thoughts. I think, and this might sound like a duh to every parent out there, but I think an antidote is having regular conversations with our kids that don't necessarily feel um, necessarily heavy or rife with like, okay, oh no, mom's coming. What is she going to tell me I'm doing wrong now? I have to watch this for myself every time I have a senior in high school, because we're having the conversations about college applications and scholarship applications and all the things that they need to do that internally I'm screaming like, oh my gosh, will you just do this please and not wait till the last minute? But so we create weekly meetings with them so that, okay, we are going to talk about your scholarship applications every Friday at 3 or whatever, so that they know the rest of the week when they see me coming, I'm not going to talk to them about that. But we still have dinners around the table and we still say, like, what was a highlight of your day? What's something you learned? And just talking about our daily lives without a lot of commentary. I don't want to say commentary like we don't pour into our kids. We absolutely do. But, just hearing them talk about their friends or the things that are important to them or their music or some ridiculous meme that they find funny that I completely don't understand anymore because I don't understand Gen Z humor, those kinds of things. To not to talk to them as though like this matters to you. So I'm going to listen as though this matters and not just like kids these days, that kind of talk. Um, One thing that I think a lot of us parents of adolescents do these days is kind of sit with worry. We talk a lot about like what's to be done with Gen Z, and a lot of it is valid. When it comes to screens and loneliness and mental health and all those things. The thing that I have found to be true with every single student, just about I've had in the 8, 9 years of teaching, is that they agree. Like there aren't really any adolescent students or kids I've had that think like, no, I'm not addicted to a phone, or no, I'm loneliness isn't a problem in my generation, or every single one of them acknowledges like this is a real problem and I hate it. Like in fact, a lot of them, I've had a fair number of conversations in a group setting where they all say like we wish we didn't have to have a phone, but we do have phones so that we don't miss out on each other's, like having a social life or finding out about some hangout or, whatever. Like, but we long for those days like when you were a teenager and didn't have to have that. So I think I want to encourage parents to not just see the kids as like antagonists to our motive of wanting what's best for them. They actually want that too. And so they want a lot of those fences that we want to put up to protect them. Um, the Chestertonian fences of like, these are good to have, even if you don't fully understand why they are there. They might not say it that way. They may push back on the rules, but they actually do want them, and are grateful. And my daughter, who's already, just a few years out of that, has already commented on some of the things we did at home that she's so grateful we did. So that's good feedback for me.
That is great. It's great feedback and reminders for all of us.
Yeah.
Is there anything in your world and life as a homeschooler that you felt like if we didn't homeschool, I might not have learned this otherwise? I might not have discovered this otherwise if we hadn't been homeschooling?
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of that is about me, right? I feel like there's most home educators would say like that was an education primarily for me. It feels like, going to school again. And so there's so much I would have missed out on personally in my betterment as a mom, as a wife, as a person as a whole. Um, So there's that. I think there's also just a lot of that put in time. I know all of us have experienced probably around February, March, the why are we doing this? Why am I choosing the intentionally harder way of, or seemingly harder way of doing school with our kids? And so there are times when you just feel defeated because it feels like so much work and you almost don't want to complain to anyone because it sounds like you regret. And they would just say, well, you could just put him in school and you don't necessarily want to go that route. So you just feel alone sometimes and feeling this like we've made a huge mistake. But um, with only 2.5 years left for me, I am starting to feel the opposite of how I felt in the early stages of like, this is going to be a lot of time with my kids for a really long time. And I know it's cliche, the whole it goes by so fast. So I'm not going to just tell, the parent of 6-year-olds, like, just enjoy it because I get it. I get it. It's hard to hear that. But I am just floored already that I only have 2.5 years left. And I feel a little bit of that. I have to remind myself that I don't need to panic about that, that I will remain in my kid's life, Lord willing, lifelong, and that had I think maybe the yes, quality, but quantity of time we spent together, I think will pay dividends later in life. Like we remain a pretty tight family, a clan, even with my daughter 1,000 miles away. Just the other night, we did a family Zoom chat, and did an Advent tradition that we always do together. And so I think we would have missed out on a lot of, I mean, I don't know who's to say. I'm not here to say had we done traditional school, we wouldn't still be a tight unit, but I do sense that we really are who we are because of so much shared experience. We did a lot of the same things together. I mean, we did that backpacking around the world together trip. We still talk about that. And we did the same classes. We read the same books. We went on the same field trips, and so I think, in the thick of it, sometimes that feels maybe, I don't want to say pointless, but it feels a bit like I'm not sure this is worth the challenge. But man, I already feel that I'm so glad we did. There's no way I'm going to ever regret doing what we have done, ever, ever. I'm already so glad that we are still doing it for a couple more years because I know I'm going to miss it, which is crazy. I never thought I would miss these long days, but I'm going to miss them.
Oh, amen, amen. I could not say that heartily enough because me with the senior, so I've got one semester left, not even years,
Mm,
one semester to, and each one has gone, and I will tell you something that has so fortified me, and I didn't even know really what it was doing for me, but years and years ago when my family was in Canada, I was working toward my master's degree at that point, and we were young kids and wrestling 100 different efforts and things. And I met a fellow mom who I think she had maybe 7 or 8 kids. I'm not entirely sure, but a lot. And they had done, dotted around Europe and other places and lived in small environments with lots of lots of family members. Our family did that as well in China for some time. Um, and she and when you live kind of like a full family life but in small spaces and then kind of itinerant and then time keeps passing and moving, something that she said to me was I have cherished every stage and I haven't wanted to go back nor rush forward. I've just cherished every stage. And
mm,
then she also said when it comes to moving and when you have to move, we certainly had to do this in China, like leave large portions of what we had accumulated, but leave it behind. It couldn't, cross the ocean with us and so forth. And that too, she shrugged off and said, and that's stuff you don't miss. You cherish every stage and stuff you don't miss. And I don't mean to, be dismissive of stuff because things are special to us, but that was very helpful and instructive to me personally about what I want to hang on to and cherish, and then what I don't want to get bogged down in mourning something that doesn't need to be mourned. So
mm.
I wonder if you've experienced some of those same feelings or emotions.
Oh man, for sure. I mean, we lived in Turkey for 3.5 years and had to do a very similar thing because not only did we move back to the States, but we moved back kind of suddenly. And so we left a whole apartment worth of stuff, and that felt very huge at the time. But my daughter was 6 then, so we're talking like 15 years ago now. And you're right. I don't, the stuff I thought would be so hard to leave it. God provides. I feel like so much of parenting and, by default or, by proxy homeschooling is God giving us the grace to do what we need to do right at that exact moment and not too soon and not too late. God's always right on time, right? And we're given the grace for that stage. And sometimes you can sense, that whenever you're in a season of transition, that God's also like slowly pulling back some of the grace. I know that's maybe not how it works, but it feels like it to be in that stage to where that is why, when you have all young adults, you can look back on the newborn stage and be like, whew, I don't know how I went through that. I'm glad God sustained me. I don't remember literally. Maybe that's a kindness of the Lord that we don't remember. Um, and why you're in the thick of the baby stage and you think, I don't know how I'm going to handle teenagers. That sounds so hard. You don't need to know yet. Like God's not giving you the grace for that season, and you don't need to, So I think God gives us exactly what we need right when we need it. And so I love what that woman said, though, because I do feel the temptation sometimes to want to reminisce or to live in nostalgia land of like, oh, when the kids were little and they played instead of, right now they're at a job and in college and, good things. But at the sacrifice of missing out on the good that's here and now, I will look back on today and with fondness and affection. But I don't want to spend it all just like, I don't know, wishing for when they were 10 years younger. It's very tempting to do though. Or 10 years older when they're little and you can't wait for them to like feed themselves and clean up, after them and to drive themselves to all the places. There's so much that you kind of think if only we'll get to that stage, it'll get easier or something.
Mhm.
And every stage is good. You're right. I needed that reminder.
Yeah. Oh, so good. And I brought this up before, but I don't remember in what context. So, and it just comes to mind as well. Speaking of what you left behind in Turkey, and then when we too sort of had to pack up and pick up and leave China pretty quickly. And we had been having like a home group in meeting in our homes on Sundays and so forth. And so for a number of weeks on end, we just had the giveaway wall. Like, here's all the stuff that, come and take what you need, whether it was out of pantries or bedrooms or whatever it may be, because it's not going with us. We have these suitcases where the stuff that will go. Meanwhile, I had been, schooling my kids for 5 years or so there. And I had, like papers and papers of, oh, this is my little baby's handprints, or this is this or that, all kinds of things. And there were some things, books that were going to come back with us, books that were going to go on the giveaway wall. And then tons of worksheets or whatever it may be, or papers, or I compiled a little like scrapbook kind of thing to save some. I didn't, but I knew there was so much that was going nowhere but a big black trash bag. And I remember just like loading things in that my kids had done and that I'd put my heart into and and this, the tears coming down as I was putting that, like, where is this going? Where in my effort, where is this going? And I felt the Lord just so kindly comfort me that I'm carrying that. I'm holding that
Mm,
for you, that is held in my eternal memories in a way that it's not being lost to the bin. And
mm,
is very comforting because we can't preserve everything that we do, but he holds on to things, and I have to remind myself of that when the things that feel like it's going unappreciated. uh,
yeah,
it's not being
that's
unappreciated.
good. That's really good. Yeah, I think, I'm in a season of transition right now, parenting wise. My oldest daughter's engaged. And so we're talking about, next spring when she gets married and recognizing that there's so much to celebrate for that. Like that's a happy thing. We're thrilled, and there is a grief to that, and that is good. And to pretend like there's not a grief is just going to not be great later on. It's going to hit me at the wrong moment, and I might be a mess then. But to process that well, someone wise in my life has told me just the reminder that every transition is a grief, and that's not to say everything is bad. It's to just recognize, even with good changes, your kid, becomes, I don't know, they are potty trained. Every parent is thrilled when that happens, right? But even that, there's a little grief of the they're no longer, or even birthday, your 5-year-old is no longer ever going to be four. And to be okay with the sadness of that helps you, kind of like what we were saying earlier, the bitter and sweet. It helps you actually appreciate the sweetness of the good part of that, and to pretend like that doesn't exist is not great for us moms. I think it'll all accumulate at just the wrong time if we don't process well.
Oh, that's such a good exhortation because
Yeah.
yeah, and if you ignore, suppress, dismiss the grief, it's not like it
Yeah.
evaporates. It's gonna find a
Yeah.
way out. So
That's right.
yeah, thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been really meditating on the poem "Nothing Gold Can Stay" with
Hmm.
it's Robert Frost, but it's been very
Hmm.
instructive to me in it is so sort of mourning this nothing gold can stay, but at the same time, when nature's first green as gold, it's hardest hue to hold, but then it passes on, but it gives way to the new buds, the green, the birth, so it's just like you said, yeah, it's those marriages, and it is grievous. There's a reason that
Hmm.
it's always the father giving the daughter away, like, what? I'm giving, there's
Yeah.
definitely some grief there, but it
Right.
opens the doorway for this new joy, this new an additional family member, the multiplication of love, not the diminishment of it.
That's right.
Um, well, okay, Tish and I have talked for a good bit, but I know that there have been some great folks listening in, and so I do want to open it up for anybody who has a question. I know you're meditating. You can drop it in the chat. You can put it, come on, Tisha, or just unmute yourself and lay it on us.
Hello. Well, first
Hey.
of all, I just wanted to say hi because I've been following you forever. When you said your book was 2015, I'm like, oh, I remember you getting ready for that trip. So I feel like either I was introduced through MOPS. Did you write a book for MOPS, maybe or
I
not?
spoke at a few MOPS
Yeah.
events, maybe.
And then yeah, and then again, I followed all the mommy blogs. My oldest is going to be 18, so it's been a long time.
Mm.
But I was just wondering because I was looking at some of your stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I've always been drawn to like the true, good, beautiful. But kind of like, what have you always homeschooled? I can't remember. Have you always homeschooled? That's my first question. And
Okay.
secondly, how do you do such a beautiful job crafting your professional life while raising children? Do you know what I'm saying? Because I feel like I'm looking at all the books that you read last year. I'm like, wow, life goals. You're awesome. Again, like how, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I'm in a
I
different
do.
season right now of transition of being, I was like the full stay-at-home mom for, the last half, and now my husband is home,
Hmm.
kind of making a switch and just, yeah, how do you do that while you're homeschooling your
Yeah.
children? Yeah.
Those are great questions. I have homeschooled the whole time, except for like one year when two of our kids went to a local school after that big trip. And then one year when one of our kids, it was kind of in a like, this is good for this season, but we're not doing this full term. So we always took a year at a time, kid at a time approach to schooling with the assumption that our default was homeschooling. And so, every January, February, you start thinking about the next year, which always feels crazy to me. Like, what? You already want me to know what we're going to do next year? But that's a good, reason to start doing that. And so we would do that every year. And then 9 times out of 10, it was like, no, we're going to still do this. Our methods changed all the time, resources and stuff. But, and then in terms of doing that with work, I think one thing that's helpful to know is like there's tons of stuff I don't do. You know, there's a lot for a season when the kids were really little. And I had a book manuscript, contract with a publisher. I had a babysitter come in regularly, 3 days a week, especially when I had a book deadline coming in for like 5 hours at a time. So I had a good 15 hours with the babysitter. Didn't always do that, but we dedicated our resources for that season. There's a lot I don't do online that I could otherwise do. I don't, I podcast, but it's really small, or I am not on all the social media things at all, and that actually helps me focus a great deal. I'm not on social media much. So, um, there was a time when I realized, okay, I am only on, like, I'll just throw Instagram under the bus, because I felt like they told me I had to, whoever they were, if I wanted to have an audience and write a book and all that, you're supposed to do this. So, and then I realized, like, I don't even like it. It is causing really bad things in me, all the vices, would just flare up anytime I opened the app. I just hated it so much. I hated what it did to me. And then finally I was like, I'm just not going to do it. Like, and if it means no book contract or a smaller book contract, that is worth it to me for my, just daily life and how I wanted to live. So there's just a lot I don't do is the long way to say that. In terms of like getting things done that I do, it helps that my husband's also self-employed. He does work out of the house, but he's got a flexible job, because he's his own boss. And so whenever there's seasons of either a deadline or, he always leads the pilgrimages with me. That's because he creates his own schedule too. And so we work in tandem. Our kids have always known that about the two of us, like that's what they have seen. So there are times when literally all five of us are on the table doing our work, or, when my oldest lived at home. And so they just, I don't know, I never really separated my work life from my at-home life. And then there were times that I could look back and it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I wish I didn't spend so much time, like late hours, um, editing, writing, doing whatever it is I needed to do that probably could have been let go. So it's not that I did everything perfectly. I think some of those early years, I wish I didn't. I just chilled about some of the things. But the internet was also in that heyday of becoming whatever it was, before all the things took off. And, you just feel like you always have to keep up with the algorithm in order to stay relevant. And so, I did succumb to some of that in those early years, but Lord, thank the Lord, I was kept from a true breakdown or a true, just disastrous situation on the home front, which can happen sometimes in that line of work. So I know that's a really, kind of hodgepodgey sort of answer that maybe didn't say too much other than broadly. Yeah.
No,
I
thank
don't
you.
know.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
nice to talk to other moms. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Anybody else have other questions? That's very insightful because it helps us to know like everything is a cost benefit. And I love the
Hmm.
fact that whether we work with our husbands at home or not, as homeschoolers, life at home and the blurry lines of what when work happens and how it happens. Sometimes at the Blake household, it'll be like work party in the living room, everybody. We know we all have to do stuff. Just grab your
Yeah.
laptop. We're just going to come in the same general vicinity and work together.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
I
Anybody else?
have a question, but hi Tish, I just
Hi.
wanted to thank you for saying about the things that you don't do.
Hmm.
Because in the whole social media realm, right, doesn't matter what your platform it is, all you see are the things that everyone is doing, right? You just see that like forward, like this is what I want to show the world what I'm doing. And you don't see the things that they're not doing necessarily. And it kind of makes a person, like, a homeschooling mom especially, feel like a failure, like, well, we could barely get through our Advent reading, let alone go and, do all these fun crafts and do all this. And so I think it is so important to let other moms know, like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm doing that you see, but behind me there is a dumpster fire. Like, like I've got
Yeah.
dishes, I've got. And so having people know, like, yes, this is what I'm doing, this is what you see, but really there's so much that I'm not doing
Yeah.
also. And I think it's
Yeah.
so important because, I have, other homeschooling moms all the time. They're like, well, we don't even know how you work in homeschool. And I'm like, yeah, well, if you come to my house on a random Tuesday, I guarantee you it's a disaster because I'm working in homeschooling and like, there's dishes like overflowing in the sink until I can get to them. Like, you know, and so having that, like, these are things I don't do, I think is just so important than trying to
Hmm.
tell someone like this is what I do. No, no, but this is really what I don't do to kind of make someone, not feel as behind or as like
Yeah.
not accomplishing enough. So I'm
Yeah.
books, I homeschool my kids, but these are the things that I need help with, which is perfectly fine. It's perfectly
Yeah.
okay. But just verbalizing, I think,
Hmm.
is is great comfort to people. So I just want to thank you for saying
Yeah.
that.
Well, and it's interesting to think that like 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't have had any way we would have access to everybody's daily life like we do. And so there's no way to even know what you're not doing in light of what someone else is doing. So it's a really recent phenomenon, I think, to for us to feel so, I don't know, angsty about all we're not getting done. And it's only because we're seeing what other people are doing. I think even in the type of homeschooling we do, it's helpful to remember, because there's so many ways to do it now, it's easy to feel like you should do all the things. And when you just learn maybe how God's equipped you or the interests he's given you to just lean into that, you know, like for example, I used to always say when my kids were little, like I'll be the book mom, meaning like we'll have good read alouds and read good books together, but I'm not a craft mom. Like there's moms that do really cool volcanoes for science and all the whatever, the Nile River thing that everyone does when they do ancient Egypt, all those, like I just never did those. It's like, sorry, kids, here, I'm happy to go to the store and buy all that for you and you figure it out. Or even field trips. I didn't do a lot of those. My husband, when he had a more flexible schedule, he would take the kids on outings and stuff. It just wasn't my thing. So it's helpful to remember, like, we all have strengths and we all have interests and to kind of tap into them and to not sweat all those other things because none of us had, in our own education had all those um, experiences in our youth and we're okay. And so now even in high school, I outsource 99.9% of what my kids do um, because that's how I can't, they don't need me teaching them chemistry. That's not a good idea. I do their humanities, but through a classroom setting, because that's what we do here locally. So there's just so many resources now. It's easy to feel like you should do all of them, but really we can only do so much in every given, day.
Mm. Well, that is perfectly teed up because I wanted to mention in terms of Scully Academy and outsourcing. I outsource large portions of my daughter's, senior year to Scully Academy. So I do want
Mm.
everybody to be sure to know that our enrollment for the coming academic year will actually open. Uh, mm, preview will open at the end of January and open enrollment at the very start of February. So we hope to equip folks. If we can be of support to you in any way, we are ready, willing, and able to do that. And then in the meantime, you can also do spring courses. Nancy can put some things in the chat if anybody wants to check out spring courses that you can enroll in. And even if you are just dying for something over the Christmas break, we have 3-day online nativity and advent camps, which are fun and little taste test opportunities and great. In fact, Miss Tisha Frost is going to be teaching one of these advent camps in our Aquinas house. Um,
Cool.
Two
so
for one, I'm having my daughter take it. I'm like,
yeah,
hey, you're
see.
gonna do it and I'm gonna teach it. It's gonna be great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, so hopefully really, really valuable, resourceful opportunities for folks as we at Scully Academy and Classical Academic Press really like to come alongside folks in the calling of educating and raising our children. So if we can help you at all, reach out to us, support@scullyacademy.com. We'd be happy to help. And then in the meantime, I really want to give the last word to you, Tish, if there is anything like exhortation, advice, a message for homeschooling moms, what would it be?
Well, I will say first off, though, I've been super grateful for Scully Academy this year because my boys are taking 3 classes with you guys, and they have had nothing but great experiences with all the classes so far. We're so grateful for them. They've been a really good partnership with us and what we're doing at home. So excellent, excellent classes. Largely, the thing that comes to mind. So in my class, we do a little liturgy to start off our day, a question and answer. And the last question I always ask my students are, why do we want to be educated? And the answer they always have to say is because education is learning to love the right things in the right way. And I think as parents, it's helpful for us to remember that because it's true for us as well as, our own students that or our own children, that it's so easy to get bogged down in the like, but will you get into college? Because that will be the sign that I didn't screw you up too much. Or that you can, hold a conversation with an adult or, whatever it is, all these metrics that we want to use as like, are we doing things right? That for all of us, because I think this is God's design for us as humans, the end goal is rightly ordered loves, right? And yeah, that can look a bit like, not convoluted, but a stretch to our student who struggles with math to love math in the right way. But there is truth to that, right? Understanding its role in how the world works and, therefore how it works in my own life, but also, what really matters, those true, good, and beautiful things, and to put them in their rightful place. So I say that as an encouragement, not to make you feel like, oh gosh, am I doing all that wrong? But to remember that that's our end goal for our kids. And ultimately, that's our end goal with us, right? Like that we should also practice rightly ordering our loves every day. And that as our kids' primary teacher, the best way we can do that is model it. So continue to pursue true, good, and beautiful things. And you're already, I would argue 90% of the way there when it comes to giving our kids good education. Because we're not going to teach them everything, right? We can't, but we can focus on the fundamentals. And to me, that's about the biggest fundamental there is.
Oh, I'm so glad that to hear you say that. I heard one of our instructors, a science instructor, recently use this phrase that so many people are caught up in the education or the resume arms race.
Mm.
Oh,
That's good.
uh, we don't want to be, that's not what we're after. That's not what we're trying to
Yeah.
do. This is not an arms race. So in our children's resume of
Mm.
we're trying to cultivate their rightly ordered love. So beautifully said. Um, Tish, I'm so glad to have visited with you. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. It's been so beautiful and enriching. And I'm so glad for all you moms who got to join us early or late. The recording will be sent out, so you'll get to benefit from all of these riches. And I really do encourage you all to enjoy Tish's resources. Go to her website. You can see all the books and all the resources, and really you can hop into this anytime. It's not
Hmm.
just starting at the very beginning. And it's been so beautiful and rich for us. So thank you again so much for joining us. And
Thank
I
you.
wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And thank you again, Tish. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. It was great.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.